think it ultimately has to come back to trust. I think all of us, whatever industry you're in, but particularly in tech, we need to make sure that we're building trust with our customers, in our case for Nextdoor, with our members. And so I think that's the theme that Sundar really needs to hit on, is how do we ensure there's maximum trust and that we don't get off on a discussion about how are they using your data.
But what you say, you don't get off on a discussion about how they, because the data ultimately is the, data is the new oil, right? And so the question is, if you cut that off, does the business make sense? Does the business model make sense?
Yeah, it has to come back to your customer. And I think if you're providing your customer with relevant content and high utility, then your customer will give you the information that you need to do that. You need to do that well. And so I think that's the tone that Sundar needs to hit. I think he's a very approachable CEO. I think he's very deep in the weeds of what his customers want, and I think he wants to do right by them. It's something we think a lot about at Nextdoor.
What's the distinction in your mind between Facebook and Google and how they approach data? Is there a distinction for you?
I don't know if there is a distinction. I think it has to come back to how they feel about their customer. And that has to be your North Star of anyone leading any Silicon Valley company, but just any company out there.
What if they consider their customer to be the advertisers?
Yeah.
Who actually pays them?
Yeah, I think that's where you get off. You always have to come back to what's your customer struggle, what are you trying to solve for them, and if you do that well, your business will thrive. And I think if you get caught up in your monetization strategy, that's where I think things start to get derailed.
Sarah, it's not just how you feel about your customers, it's how your customers feel about you.
Yeah, but it goes two ways. Like if they can see you're putting them first, they'll come with you on that journey because you're giving them high utility.
But this goes back to the age-old argument of to the point that Mike's making, who the customer actually is.
But that's your North Star. And every time you're in a leadership position, you have to pull, whether it's your team, whoever it is that's out there, back to what's the North Star, how do you do right by your customer?
Well, the question is, who is the customer? I love the famous line where if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. So in this situation, you got a blending between the customer and the product, right? So what we think of as the customer is really the product. And that's where I think we get into certain situations not desirable.
But you lose your North Star. We're going to talk about Nextdoor, but the way we start the atomic unit is that you come in as a neighbor, we verify you, we know you live in that hood, and that's the beginning of the trust that we build across a neighborhood.
What do you think the chances are when you sit around, when you were at Square, when you sit around with friends at dinner, what do you think the chances are that Washington enacts meaningful regulations that change the Valley writ large when it comes to data and data privacy? Yeah,
so, clearly we've seen the beginnings of that with what's gone on in the EU with GDPR. And I think everyone has stepped up and said, we will comply, but it's not just about compliance, it's that we believe it's the right thing to do. For the
But when you say comply, by the way, and we've talked about this on the air, you hit a website, now it asks you a handful of questions under GDPR, and everybody says, okay, and they never think about it again. And is that what complying really is about?
No, it's not about hitting a terms of service. It's about believing, going back to that you're putting your customer first. And in the U.S., the thing that I would like to make sure we see is that we do it at a federal level. I think the worst thing that could happen is that we don't grab it at a federal level and we start doing it state by state. And then you start bringing friction into a customer experience where it slows everything down. And I think we need to be very careful of that balance of innovation and disruption, which the U.S. has been amazing at, balanced against doing right by the customer. And that's the kind of tone for, I think, DC to strike, is how do we do that well?
See, we had a guest in earlier who said he thinks it's less than 50% odds that the U.S. federal government actually sets any regulation, that this is a lot of talk and a lot of fury, and that it probably doesn't go anywhere. But it sounds like you are almost advocating for having some sort of federal law so that you don't have state-by-state regulation or local entities.
I think that is the right way to do it. If we're going to regulate, I think it has to be done at that level. State by state, I think, will be a really bad outcome. I've seen this at Square. Lending licenses are state by state, so you end up with this really tough way to build a product.
Since you're from the inside, what is the thing that you look at, you go, that's just terrible. It's just terrible that the industry does this. What is the thing that makes you cringe? By the way, a big article in the New York Times yesterday just about how much data is being collected wherever we go, which actually surprised me, even though I sort of conceptually, theoretically knew it. Seeing it in black and white made me cringe.
What makes me cringe is when people lose sight of who their customer is and the trust they need to build with that customer, and get off on maybe losing sight of how they're monetizing it. Because again, I think Bezos has said it well in the past. I sit on the board of Walmart. I think Sam got it right in the beginning. If you have the North Star of what will your customer always want, and when you're in areas like commerce, lowest prices, most relevant content, highest utility, that is what will build decade-long, hundreds of year type companies. And what makes me cringe is when I start to see companies or teams flipping and doing things for the revenue model.
Talking about the revenue model, and this is true, by the way, of Google. It's probably true of Amazon to some degree. I don't know if it's true of Walmart. Businesses that effectively compete with their own customers, because that's the other piece of this. I don't know how much that's going to come up in the conversation today, but you have a situation where obviously Google has a business, but then also is a platform for other businesses. They're then competing against some of their own customers. Amazon increasingly has created a marketplace and yet is competing against its own marketplace. Sometimes not clear it's doing the best job for the consumer itself, doing the best job for Amazon or doing the best job for Google. How do you think that plays into all of this?
Yeah, that is definitely a difficult one. So on the one hand, I'm firmly a believer of first party and third party, that you can build a product yourself, but that you can also bring in third party partners. And there is healthy competition. I actually think it's better for the competition internally in your company, because it puts your developers on notice that it's not just I can only build things for my member base. I'm actually going to have to compete with someone who is only focused on that.
But then it becomes complicated about which one you're going to prioritize on the screen, right?
But again, if your North Star is what's best for my customer, the best thing will win out in the end. But I do think that platforms like Amazon have definitely suffered from we're going to sell this, but we're also going to somehow help this local business. And I am a huge believer in local business, right? This is what is driving me to Nextdoor, because I think no one has done local well in a way that is trusted by local business.
Why do you think Facebook never did local well? They seemed like they should have been the obvious one.
Because they're really not about local in the end. When I join Facebook, I'm joining to connect to my friends across the globe, right? I grew up in Northern Ireland. That's where my friends are coming from. When I join a place like Nextdoor, I'm connecting to hyper-local neighborhoods. And so Facebook just doesn't have the density in a neighborhood to do local well.